Good evening and welcome back to the podcast tonight. Thank you for joining us. It is Friday evening and we're going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. As you well know, I have been talking a lot about the ESV and all the modern Bibles and the modern scholars, talking about where they come from, how they got here. It seems to me as if everybody just wants to gloss over different things and think that there's no connection in these things or these folks in different places. How German rationalism is connected to Britain. How is that possible? Because there are men who are connected between two. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. I want to start on one thing. I'm going to move in different directions. I'm going to talk about the ESV again. I haven't talked about that in a while. Let's talk about the ESV Catholic edition. Now, the ESV Catholic edition uses the Septuagint Apocrypha. And one would say, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the Apocrypha, man. It's a Septuagint, man. It's been around for centuries. Well, here's my problem. They use the one by Alfred Rolfs. I may have pronounced his name wrong. He's German. German. And we talked about that, Germany, and where that goes. He had written it, so trying to think of the best way to say, yeah, he wrote it. He wrote an edition of the Septuagint in 1935. He was actually influenced by his teacher, Paul de Lagarde. Paul Lagarde, or de Lagarde, was an anti-Semite. He was pro-Darwinism, socialism, and he was also good friends with not Hitler, he could have been, Stalker, who was a Lutheran anti-Semite theologian. Alfred Rolfs worked closely with Rudolf Smend. His teacher, is Julius Wellhausen, who was actually connected to Westcott and Hort, and considered by many to be an anti-Semite. How about that, huh? You got some fine folks, ESV. You got some fine folks. I guess everybody reading the ESV. Why would you give permission to the Catholics and start using the text by anti-Semites? I'm just saying. Now, let's look at Rudolf Smend. I'm going to go through a couple of these names real quick. Rudolf Smend, where did he go? University of Göttingen. Paul de Lagarde, University of Göttingen. Alfred Rosenberg, a Nazi Lutheran. Wellhausen, a Lutheran Catholic. Not a Lutheran, I chose to call him a Catholic because I think it's convenient. He was a Lutheran and a Catholic. That's what it is. Now, where does this all come from, though? They just didn't come out of the clear blue. Everything comes from a location, a spot. It builds. They push things. They push it further and further. I'll give you an example. I was talking to somebody one time, and this was about gas and things like that. They know they can't keep something at a certain level, so they push it up. Let's just say gas is $3 a gallon, right? They push it up to $4, but they bring it all the way back down to $3.20. But see how they get the 20 cents in? That's kind of like your religions and well, wait, aren't you a born again Christian? Exactly, which I don't follow a religion. So there you go. You bring it back down to $3.20, and they say, yes, we won, we got them down. Did you? Because they still pushed ahead. It's just like the religious ideology. It's like the socialism theologians who want to get their message across. They want to get their translation. They want to get their change from the truth to lies. Not all complete lies, because you remember, they got to keep really close to it. They just have to change a few things. And if you change a few things over time, a little here, a little there, and you can get far enough from the truth. That's just the way they do it. It's just the way it works. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just telling you that's how it works. I want to take a look. We'll start with empiricism. Never could get that right. What is it? So, some will say it's a philosophical approach, asserting that knowledge comes primarily from the sensory experience and observation. Let's look at key people in that field. You have John Locke. Who is John Locke? Some would say that he argued that the mind at birth is a blank slate, and that knowledge is acquired through experience and feelings. He put out a work a long time ago called An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. He contended that all ideas originate from sensory experience, emotional feelings, self-knowledge, which is opposite of what the Bible teaches us. Now, why would I mention people like this? Well, because this is where we are today. You look at your charismatic churches, you look a lot, even at your Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, all your modern churches today have really gone away from faith and knowledge given to them by God and leaned on thine own understanding, which is, again, not what you're supposed to do. Then you look at George Berkeley. He challenged materialism, remember socialism, Marxism, with his idealist philosophy. Again, philosophy. Arguing that physical objects don't exist independently from perception. In a writing that he put out, a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, he posed that existence is contingent upon your own self-perception. Say what now? I guess that's great for the philosophers, the atheists, the agnostics, and all that. But it doesn't seem like a Christian thing, right? We're going to get back to that. You know what? I'll just get to it now. John Locke was a Calvinist. George Berkeley, an Episcopalian. Let's move on to David Hume. David Hume. Who is David Hume? Seems like a nice feller. Who is this gentleman? Who is this gentleman? Well, this gentleman was a critical figure, an important figure in empiricism, who questioned the possibility of a different knowledge. He wrote something called the Treatise of Human Nature. He examined the limits of human understanding. Again, our own self-understanding. The nature and the role of habit and experience in shaping self-relied upon beliefs. His skepticism had a rather large, significant impact on many people to come. These are gentlemen, these are folks we're talking about coming out of the Enlightenment period, Enlightenment time frame. You have to understand that. Let's talk about rationalism. Okay, a reminder here. Empiricism is what? Knowledge from only experience and what you can see. No faith. These are men who are supposed to be of some sort of Christian background. Rationalism is what? A reason and logic, also not based on faith and belief. You have gentlemen like Rene Descartes. I don't know. By the way, David Hume was very good friends with French Jesuits. Not my connecting making or my attempt to connect him with him. It's just well known. If you do the research and dig this guy up. Well, I mean, I don't mean dig him up like from the ground. That's not what I mean. Rene Descartes, I don't know. My knowledge stops at trying to pronunciate or enunciate people's last names that I don't know. He is often considered the father of modern rationalism. Isn't that funny how we do that? He's the father of this and the father of this. You should only be the father of your own child, and there's only one father above us. Rene emphasized the role of reason in the quest of knowledge. His famous, he had a famous writing, I Think, therefore I am, illustrates his belief in the certainty of self-awareness. Again, about yourself, Tony Robbins, all these guys, and reason. Rene also sought to establish a foundation for elected scientific knowledge based on clear and distinct ideas of which you can see and prove. Rene Descartes, by the way, was Catholic. Started Jewish, I believe. No, I'm thinking of another guy who's Jewish. Next guy I'm going to talk about was born Jewish. Rene was Catholic. You don't find that interesting? I do. Let's talk about Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza is known to have developed a rationalist system in which he applied reason to understand the nature of reality and the universe. His work, Ethics, explores the relationship between God, nature, and the universe using a rational framework for our own self-understanding. See what happens? They throw God in, and then they go back to self-understanding, the self. All about self, what they can do, what they can prove, what they can see. Baruch Spinoza was a Neoplatonist. He was a big believer in Neoplatonism, which is one of the foundations of the Roman Catholic Church. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Leibniz advanced rationalist thought with his theory of pre-established harmony. It's almost like predestination. That's what it was. When I first read that one time, I had to keep that in my writing when I was preparing this because I thought that was excellent. Which posed that the universe, or the universe's phenomena, its sudden existence, was harmoniously coordinated by some, not a, by some divine plan. Well, it's in the Bible. His contributions include the development of calculus, and I want to pull that in because he did something good. Calculus is great, isn't it? None of us use it. And he really worked on something called the nature of reality. Ha! That's a funny thing, isn't it? Oh, by the way, Leibniz was a Roman Catholic Lutheran with an ecumenical agenda, but they all do. So you have a Calvinist, an Episcopalian, a guy who's just friends with the French Jesuits, another Catholic, a Neoplatonist who's what is the foundation of the Catholic Church, and another Roman Catholic Lutheran ecumenical gentleman. You don't find that interesting at all of those pieces put together? Seems rather convenient, doesn't it? I mean, how I just dropped a piece of paper here in the studio. This wonderful studio. I don't know why that's down there, but that's not what I was looking for. So when you look at these things, and yet, going back to this, rationalism and empiricism were two of the most influential philosophical approaches during the Enlightenment period, which lasted, most people know, from the 17th to the 18th century, but is really up until the end of the 18th century, when again, I've talked about a man that nobody really likes to talk about, Immanuel Kant, and a lot of people go back to him, and some are neo-Cantonians and so forth. And it's very interesting how that works out and all the connections there. But one of the big colleges, and I've talked about this before with the University of Göttingen. You have the University of Göttingen and University of Tübingen, and I probably pronounced these wrong. I should have looked them up, but I didn't, so I apologize for that. But these were very key universities in creating these people, and destruction of everything we know is from the cause of them. You know, that's kind of I mean, I think it's huge. They have a lot to deal with a lot of people. We're going to talk in the future, and next week we will talk a little bit about the next podcast, whenever I get to that. We'll really be focused on the Biblia Hebraica, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about a lot of names that are connected in there. Again, you're going to find names that keep on popping up throughout all of this. You're going to find names like Immanuel Kant, like I just talked about. Even Martin Luther, we'll talk about him. We'll talk about Hegel and his influences. I think it's important to understand that, even with Tischendorf and who was actually a doctor of, we're going to talk about the Oxford movement. And where do you think it all stems from, though? That's where we're going to talk about. The Enlightenment period was key, but the 1800s and the whole push to socialism, Christian socialism, and it's not what you think, all of these things were put into place, and they fought real hard. You have to wonder, I'm not a Lutheran, or I'm not even a Baptist, Pentecostal, denomination, whatever you want to call it, none of those things. I stand on the Word of God and always will. And even men, and I will say they stand on the Word of God, don't stand on the Word of God at all. They make up all their own things. But I just look at, I think it's important to understand history, secular and Christian history, because in the past they made those two things go together. I mean, you look at the Roman Roman Catholic Church with the admiring Plato, Aristotle. They really use a lot of that work, and that's where you get the Platonist and Platonism and the Neoplatonism. And you're going to find the Roman Catholic Church, is going to, I think, slip back into the people in the Sedevacantist movement, Sedevacantism, and that whole thing. You're going to see a lot going on with that in the future. You cannot deny, after everything that comes out with all of this, with the Lutheran Church in the 1800s, we can argue or debate. Well, Martin Luther, like Martin Luther. This has got nothing to do with Martin Luther, that's for sure. It's like a lot of things that have nothing to do with somebody who's created something. They're not the same people at all, and that's the key to understanding this. Man, it's just I don't put any of this out there to be mean or anything like that, or try to offend anyone. People will get offended by whatever they want to get offended by. That's just the way it works. So I don't care so much about that. I just want to give you what the facts are here. Facts that any one of us can find and see. You can find them anywhere you want. Dig it up, do the research. It might take you a few, but, at least you'll have the information. Ask yourself things like, why does everything keep on connecting with the Roman Catholics? And a lot of these men were either Episcopalians, like I said, Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, Lutherans. You have all of that. I mean, I'm just a little blown away by nobody wants to notice it. Nobody wants to see it. Well, that's this week's little discussion, I guess you could say. Not a very long podcast. I could put all these things together and could have made a much larger podcast and an hour long, but I try not to. I try to keep them as short as I can. Makes it a lot easier for folks who don't have a couple hours to spend sitting watching videos. Some people do, but not everybody does. If you're a working guy and your family's doing things and you spend time with the family and you want truth and you want understanding and you want things that you can learn along the way, but you don't have time to do 2 hours of learning. Isn't it funny how the elite think that? And that's what they use against you. They never get to the point. It takes too long, because if they take long enough, you'll give up trying to ask questions or seek the truth, because you're just trying to live an everyday life. You got to get in that Bible, first of all. You open that Bible, you start reading those verses. King James Bible is one of the most important Bibles that I've ever got. Yes, and what about the Geneva? What about Tyndale? Well, I said it was one of the most important. I believe it's the last important Bible that has existed. I think that's where it culminated, and there's no reason to have gone beyond that. Oh, you're a weirdo. Yeah, cool. And Peter says we're supposed to be a peculiar people, so that works out, doesn't it? Stay biblical, my friends. I appreciate your time. God bless, and have a beautiful evening. Good night.